Hello, it's Michael Watts here, and welcome to episode 8 of Life on the Fretboard. Now, by the time you hear this, I will be in Cape Town, South Africa, where I'll be playing concerts, filming, doing interviews, and all the other fun stuff that my own version of Life on the Fretboard involves. So I'm recording this intro while I check my cameras and microphones, and try and remember to pack some underwear and sunscreen. I don't know if you can hear it on the skylight above me, but it is raining quite hard here in the UK. It's cold, it's grey. I'm really looking forward to some of that Southern Hemisphere sunshine. And just before that, though, I'd like to welcome one of my favourite companies, Elixir Strings, on board as sponsors for the next 3 episodes. More about that later. In the meantime, thank you very much indeed. So here we are. The first episode of 2024, and one that I already know will be a favourite of mine for years to come. So I first met my guest for this episode some 25 years ago. It was a disjointed and chaotic time in my life, characterised by early heartbreak and confusion. It was also the first time that I wholeheartedly turned to music and the guitar for solace and sanctuary. It wouldn't be the last. One band in particular, Portishead, had exploded, seemingly out of nowhere with their debut album, Dummy. I was hooked. Within a week, I'd pretty much worn out my copy, which was not easy to do on a CD. It was such a cool record. Samples, scratching, dark drum loops, and ethereal vocals, and the guitar. Well, let me tell you about the guitar. Delicious, scratchy textures, evocative, sleazy, jazzy bits, arch Bigsby wobbles, and then at the end of the album, the song Glory Box with a solo. A solo that told teenage me that somehow everything was going to be okay. Now, a couple of years later, I was visiting a guitar workshop in Devon to talk about my first custom instrument, and who should walk in but 2/3 of Portishead, including the guitar playing end. For the first and only time in my life so far, I was rendered absolutely incoherent, spectacularly unable to deal with the situation. I burbled, I gibbered. They smiled back and were actually really sweet to me, but I wanted the earth to swallow me up. Thankfully, years later, I was the only one to remember that encounter, my guest being firmly convinced that the first time he'd seen me play was in a YouTube video with a rather beautiful factory black Gibson L5 from 1977. They say you should never meet your heroes. Every experience I have had has disproved this truism completely, although sometimes it's wiser, perhaps, not to let your heroes meet you, especially in the early days. But enough of that. Adrian Utley is one of the most versatile and creative musicians the UK has produced, and his work with artists such as Jeff Beck, Patti and Glenn Branca is testament to this. Shooting to prominence in the mid-1990s with Portishead, Adrian's beautifully judged, nuanced playing with its jazz and soul sensibilities set the band apart from their contemporaries in what would become known as the trip-hop scene. But were Portishead ever really trip-hop? I mean, it's kind of like saying that the Police or, television were punk. There was something else going on there, something beautiful. And Portishead's debut album, Dummy, would go multi-platinum. The band continues to have a lasting influence in terms of production values, musicianship, inventiveness and sheer style. Adrian had accepted an invitation to join me for an episode of Life on the Fretboard after an online conversation about our shared love of the work of Fred Frith, a pioneer in the improvised and exploratory music scene. Shortly after that, I was invited to film an original 1958 Gibson Flying V. Those of you familiar with my work will understand my trepidation to go it alone with a guitar that was so far out of my comfort zone, so I asked Adrian if he'd like to join me in exploring one of the rarest and pointiest electric guitars known to humanity. I was a little taken aback at the speed with which he accepted, and I knew that this was going to be a lot of fun. I made a video of us exploring that Flying V, and there's a link in the description below. Once we'd finished with the pointy beast, we sat down to record this conversation. Adrian shares his memories of working with Jeff Beck and Glenn Branca, amongst others. We talk about his love of all guitars, from vintage L5s to dumpster-found acoustics, learning to love limitations, the revelation that was the Fender Jazzmaster, Ebo Rage, the best footwear for wah-wah pedal usage, and that solo from Glory Box. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Be advised, there is adult language throughout.
When I was at school, I was at a British public school, boarding school, and my mate picked a guitar up in our study, probably a nylon string guitar, I don't know, can't remember that. And this is a friend that we used to just piss about most of the time, right. Climbing around, the floor is lava, can't touch the floor, we have to go along the heating pipes and on the windowsills. That's what we spent our time doing. And then we were sitting in our study, shared study with loads of people, and he suddenly picked up a guitar and started playing it, and I went, my God, I didn't know you could do that. What are you doing? Show me some of that. And I swear to God, I have not put a guitar down from that day to this, and I'm 66 now, and I was 14 then.
Wow.
And I mean that, and it's been my sanctuary, it's been my everything. It's been my way of making a living. At times I thought, what the fuck am I doing? On a windy, rainy afternoon in Leeds in 1979, having played in a working men's club and hanging about to play another night in another working men's club with the band. There have been moments like that, but since I stopped playing the guitar, it's all okay again. It always is, and it always is. And everything in my life that has been transitory or nebulous, guitar has been a fixed point for me always, and doesn't matter what sort of guitar it is, really. And sometimes just the presence of it is enough.
Right, just in the peripheral vision, just there next
just to have it there, and it leaning in the chair. I was recently in Greece, and a really good friend of mine lent me his house. I lent our family his house, and he said, there's a guitar there. It's like a Martin copy. It's nice. I played it for about a minute, and then I put it back in its case and didn't play it for a whole week, But I knew it was there.
Right.
Yeah, and I can't say enough, really. It's always been a friend to me, and the joy of the sound of, I think I started playing an inner tube repair kit tin with a rubber band stretched over it and a piece of wood as a tuner, so going when I was before that, when I was probably about 10.
Right.
I distinctly remember that, and that would have signposted it, really, but I've never thought of it like that, really. But also the joy of when I first played electric guitar with some friends, and I was really shit, and they were shit too. We're all shit, and we had a shit drum kit. Everything was shit, but the joy of playing a riff together. Didn't even know actually that the bass and the guitar were tuned to the same thing. No idea at all. But I knew. I don't know. What was the riff? We would have known. Well, it would be, you really got me, or something like that, kind of simple but brutal riff, just to play that together, to hear somebody else. I experienced the thing that my friends had experienced in orchestras that I could never be part of, that
right.
Group making music rather than sitting on your own playing music was enormous moment for me, and it hasn't left me. So, we just were playing with a Flying V, weren't we? And
yes, we were.
Yeah. And I think I played Iron Man. Now, if we were playing that riff together, I would get the same buzz.
It is a landmark moment where you first lock in with your first band. I was there playing some of your songs, in fact.
Oh, really? Wow. That's a miserable thing.
in the mid-90s. It was a huge amount of fun. And, you're just kids, you're trying your best, and you can be a bit shit. That's fine. But even in its larval form, in such a primal state, there will be a moment where you're suddenly all there together.
Yeah.
And it feels far more than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, very much so.
It's absolutely intoxicating. And I remember feeling, I want this. I want this every day.
Yeah. Yeah, I had the same feeling, and without any idea how that would happen, but I have made it happen, and I've never done anything else apart from some painting and decorating. I didn't have a degree. I went to art school, but some painting and decorating and some manual work when I was 18, 17. I've done nothing else, but I've done some fairly shitty musical jobs, you know. But it's led me where I want to go, you know.
What was your first electric guitar? Because that's the instrument that I mostly associate you with.
Yeah, my first electric guitar was called a Wilson.
Oh, yes.
Which I think I see them around now. They're like a cheap, probably really cool actually. The pickups probably, you know,
they're worth a fortune.
Yeah, exactly.
Retrofit them in a Telecaster.
They're sort of, yeah, exactly. There you go. Exactly that. I don't know what happened to those pickups. That was my first guitar. Then I had a Jedson.
Oh, yeah.
Which was awful. And you don't realise when you're a kid. I mean, I think the amount of guitars you can get now and the level of even if they're really cheap, they will be in tune. Yeah. I never realised why I sounded so terrible was because the guitar was terrible too.
You don't know it at the time, though.
No, how would you? Yeah. There's no one to tell you. And when I was a kid, there was no internet or anything. There was very little information. And also, older players, because I suppose I was a kid, were virtually saying, fuck off, kid, I'm not telling you my stuff, you know.
Yeah.
Were really unhelpful. So I used to just watch people play a lot. I watched this guy called Eamon Mullen, who from Northampton, because I come from the Midlands, come from Northampton. I've no idea. Nobody I know knows where he went or where he's gone or where he came from even. Absolutely incredible player. Had a 335. Played it through a tape player into an amp to get distortion, because you know not everything was available then. You know, you found a thing, and I used to watch him and just completely tried to soak up everything I'd heard from him. And I used to walk the 12 miles back to my village from Northampton at night. Yeah, no, I definitely remember this a lot. Absolutely buzzing on what I'd heard that night. And I would be 18 probably then. It was either bus fare, pint of beer, packet of cigarettes, and I never would go with the bus fare.
2 out of 3.
Yeah.
When you first started, were you aware of the effects of distortion and things? I don't mean the literal, the sort of psychological effects, but were you aware of what could be done with a guitar? Because I certainly wasn't when I got a guitar. Actually, I was loaned an amp for about 6 months, which was a sort of a little PA thing rather than an actual guitar amp. And
super clean.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I thought that's what a guitar sounded like. I was into it.
Yeah.
It sounded okay, I thought. Yeah. And then the first distortion pedal entered my life. I was like, no, that was it. That's what I wanted. Were you aware of the sounds you were creating, or was it just kind of a?
No, I think early on we had an amp with that band that were terrible, called a Viking. I think you can look them up. They were, I don't know, they were absolutely appalling, but they were valve amps, and they had like 3 inputs, you know, like an AC30. And we used to all plug into that, the vocals,
lovely,
the bass, and we used to fight over who got the loud channel. But it was obviously super distorted, and the bass would modulate everything I was doing.
Oh,
you
of
know,
course, yeah. Whole band in mono.
Yeah, exactly. It was a racket.
All confused.
But I met Daniel Lanois one night and had a chat with him, with my friend who's really, my friend's really into Bob Dylan, and was talking to him about Time Out of Mind and saying about this thing. And I don't know if I've got this right or not, but I seem to remember him saying in an interview subsequently, it's not this, but I was interested in the concept that they both plugged into one amp, Dylan and him, and were playing just to practice something. And I'm a big fan of Lanois' production, although I don't always like the records of the bands that he works with. I've always loved his concept, and just the idea that's a sound there. That's a sound. Oh, it's one amp. Well, record it. You know, it sounds great. Isn't that all we want? Yeah. Does it matter that it's stereo? Does it matter that, you know, does it matter? Nothing matters as long as it's sounds good. I'd
like, obviously, to talk about your work with Portishead.
Yeah.
which from a personal point of view was something that really touched me. And as a massive fan of the band, but also as an instrumentalist as well, I found your playing to be revelatory at that stage. I really did. Right. Yes.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Literally, so much there at a time when other guitar sounds that I'd heard hadn't really touched me in the same way. I mean, Nirvana I loved. I thought that was great stuff.
Similarly, yeah.
Yeah, and the sort of the crinklier edges of Britpop.
Yeah.
Such as it was. I loved Steve Craddock's work with the Ocean Colour Scene, because that was just
right.
Les Paul into a big Marshall Stag.
Yeah.
And then Dummy came out. And I was listening to it this morning, in fact, in preparation to our chat. The solo on Glory Box. First of all, I'd forgotten that Glory Box closes the album.
Yeah.
The solo is extraordinary. It's got everything that I longed for at that time. The playing is beautiful. The pauses are wonderful after every phrase. You've got the big bends with the beats going on there.
Yeah, that's a quarter tones again, isn't it?
Yeah, love all that.
Yeah.
You've got the selector switch.
Yeah.
Buggery. That's lovely.
No, it's not. It's the wah-wah.
No, is it?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Really?
It just happens to be my wah-wah, that kind of thing.
I assumed it was a selector switch in the band.
It's a wah-wah, yeah.
Oh.
Very rarely do that selector switch thing.
Really?
Yeah.
So it was a sort of slightly creaky wah, was it? That was just.
It's just you get it on that particular one. It just that's what it did that day with the fuzz that I had. I think it's a rat actually, a rat and a wah-wah and a crybaby, my old crybaby that I've always had. That's had new pots and things in it over the years, but it's particularly. Could have been a bit of dust, not dust, but like a little
bit of grit or something.
Yeah, a little, or just. It's hard to when you play them, you can feel all these little tones that are in there. I use my toes a lot, and I always wear Converse for years. If I wear Doc Martens, which I do, I find it really hard to play the wah-wah pedal.
Really?
Because I use my toes. For me, wah-wah started with that guy who played it at school, Jimi Hendrix. All of the stuff that goes on there.
Yeah.
I could talk a bit more about that distortion tone and something there, but in a minute about that, because that's really important. Wah-wah Watson was a really big influence on me. First of all, with Papa Was a Rolling Stone. Do you know that? The Temptations?
Yeah, absolutely.
The wah-wah playing on there is absolutely... I still listen to it and cannot get over it. It's absolutely brilliant. His phrasing, the single note stuff, not just the chords.
Beautiful. And his work with Marvin Gaye as well. It's just...
Yeah, it's fantastic. And with Herbie Hancock, absolutely amazing. There's many people from the 70s who used to use wah-wah, and so for me, it was it was part of my toolbox, really. For when I was playing jazz from like late 70s into probably 90, fairly exclusively, I had nothing but an archtop guitar and a Fender amp, no pedals. I didn't want anything in the between the things. I'd have a bit of reverb, and but I've always been interested in lots of other things. So I got out of that, and got back to my wah-wah. I love tremolo on Fender tremolo. I've always loved it. From all the things you can think of that have got tremolo on them. And then I got into some pedals. The thing about distortion for me is, and I was listening to the MC5, the live thing that they did with Kick Out the Jams and all that stuff. It was on YouTube, and Fred Sonic Smith, the sound of their guitars is so wayward. It's so turned up amps. And if you've ever done that with a turned up amp in a jam session, I remember it back in the day when you're pissed up and you've got to, you turn everything up full and you're jamming with people. And when it's up full, these old valve amps do some really odd stuff. It's almost like ring modulation. It's all sorts of odd tones that you won't get out of a pedal, you know, and it's to do with the relationship of you to there, where the guitar, you know, where you are in place, where the amp is next to you, or the speaker, sorry, and how much you've got the guitar turned up or not. And these voodoo sounds come out, you know.
They do. It's almost like a theremin, isn't it, at times?
Can be, yeah, and doubles tones like a ring mod. You can get a bit with a fuzz face fuzz, one of my favourite fuzzes. And it's exciting. It's incredible, this noise that you can make with an electric guitar when you've got it in control, you know. Well, as in control as you want to be.
On the verge.
Yeah, exactly. But being a sort of 14-year-old kid with a Marshall stack, I wouldn't have been able to deal with that, do you know what I mean? It would have been out of control, just howling.
Yeah, I don't think the human body's built for that sort of levels of punishment at that age.
No. But, so that's always been exciting to me. I mean, I love all aspects of guitar. I like quiet acoustic guitar. I like, you know, I like so many things, really.
Milestones, or fret markers if you like, are a common theme here on Life on the Fretboard. Over 20 years ago, I experienced a life-changing milestone myself when I tried a set of Elixir strings for the very first time. Now, up until that point, I'd been burning through, or perhaps sweating through is more accurate, a box of traditional, non-coated strings every month. I know. Now, I remember very vividly putting a set of these Elixirs on my guitar and marvelling how days, weeks, months later they still sounded absolutely beautiful. They felt great. They also reduced string squeak. I was hooked. Since that day, I have used nothing else, and in fact I'm now an endorsing artist for Elixir Strings, and I'm very grateful for their kind sponsorship of this podcast, even though I don't have a guitar in my hands. I rely on the long-lasting great tone of Elixir Strings on all my electric and acoustic guitars and basses. I love the sound of them on everything from a 1930s Martin 00 to a Monteleone archtop. So visit elixirstrings.com to learn about the whole range. Thank you, Elixir Strings, for making me sound as good as I possibly can all these years. We spoke about bands gelling. There must have been a time where, you know, you walked in one day and it wasn't there, and you left and it was. It had been created.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, Jeff was, when I first met Jeff, he was ahead. He already had tracks like Sad Times, which was the first one I played on, and brought this tremolo, twangy, spy style guitar, which I've always really liked.
A sort of Vic Flick kind of.
Yeah, I love Vic Flick. Yeah, I just found out Vic Flick played on a Melody Nelson record. You know,
really?
I didn't know this.
Really?
That was
Ballad
him playing the
Melody
guitar
Nelson?
on it, yeah.
No.
That's what I heard.
Really?
I just read it, yeah.
That's absolutely mind-blowing.
And the bass player was somebody else who played, I can't remember.
Herbie Flowers or something?
No, I thought it was Herbie Flowers from Always, and I would have said to you, oh no, that was Herbie Flowers.
Must be Herbie,
but it wasn't.
Michael Watts from the future here with some bass-playing trivia. So, Herbie Flowers did indeed play in a live concert version of Melody Nelson back in 2006, alongside Vic Flick and Big Jim Sullivan. But the original bass playing on the Serge Gainsbourg record was by Dave Richmond, and Dave was a founding member of Manfred Mann, who went on to do some wonderful work with Henry Mancini and Elton John and others. Right, now you know. Back to the podcast. So
the sound was there, but actually we developed a lot of new stuff, which I've talked about endlessly a lot. But it was not easy, and it was not hard. It was hard work. We put a lot of hours into it. We worked really long hours on everything and discarded a huge amount of things. You know, there are tracks, ideas, sketches that never made it, you know, and would continue to be like that always, you know, right. Things. You know, for me, it was the first time I could play some keyboards, played the bass on that record and the guitars, and there's one track called Strangers, yes, where I played I think it's just a real crappy nylon string guitar that had come out of a skip that Andy Allen, who owned the studio, had found it in a skip and slightly cleaned it up, and it was hanging around the studio. And because of the noise that we were making with the track, Beth couldn't hear the pitch,
right?
Because there was some really discrepant noises happening. And so I played like a vaguely groovy but slack chords, the bass chords that were there that you couldn't really hear, on a nylon string guitar, for her to have a guide to be able to pitch to. And then we just ditched the track for a whole section and just had that crappy nylon string with her singing. So those are the kind of things that happened,
It seemed very much from what I've read that there was a lot of informed exploration going on. I've heard stories of you guys recording and then putting things on vinyl, so you'd have your own
we did that
own discs to scratch and things like that, and that's going it's taken things to an extra level, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you could, because you couldn't otherwise do that then. There wasn't any software that would do it. We had an Atari computer, that had just about struggled with Cubase on it, and an Akai sampler, an S1001, and that was all we had. And 24-track tape machine. 23 tracks, really, because that 24th track was striped with SMPTE code to sync the Atari to.
Of course,
yeah. So we only had, and you'd try not to use 23 because that was, if you fucked up the code, everything would not work.
The whole thing falls over.
You don't want something close to that track. So, they were the limitations, and that was fine. I didn't have instruments that were great. I had a synth or two, but nothing much. Which we used, and I used to borrow stuff. I didn't even have a decent bass. I had a fretless bass that I'd ripped the frets out of, because somebody said they offered me a session, and it was quite well paid for the time.
So
when I first moved to Britain.
You can get it refretted afterwards, can't you?
I couldn't. I had no money. I was like, they said, do you want to come and play bass on this track? It's like some terrible version of All Right Now or something for a cabaret singer, and and I said, yeah. And they said, have you got a fretless? It wasn't All Right Now, but it was something like that. Have you got a fretless? I said, yeah. And that night I pulled all the frets out with my pliers,
Oh my God.
But that was the bass I used on Portishead, because I didn't have another bass, and I'd filled it in with wood filler, and that was the bass I used for years, and now it didn't have frets. But actually Pedestal, which on that record is me playing the bass harmonics, which I completely nicked off Jaco Pastorius, that's my fretless bass. On the second album there's a track called Morning Air, which we did for the Help record, and that's got me playing the fretless bass on it, and we had it so compressed that it was all like elastic liquid sound. It was great, and I couldn't have done that on a fretted bass, really.
No, absolutely not.
So it was quite a lot of just using what we had, and because there was a little bit of budget, you could go, Christ, why don't we just press our own records? I'll play look, we've got this tune we've got the intro for it and the bridge section on the guitar, we've got the drum break, let's put them all on vinyl and hear what it sounds like coming off vinyl, rather than sample Grant Green or whatever.
This invention and inventiveness and exploration, my understanding is that came from a jazz background with the Jazz Messengers.
I never play with the jazz. That's
Wikipedia.
That's Wikipedia, isn't it?
Yeah, I looked at that. I was like, is that true?
No,
can't be. No,
absolutely not.
Who wrote
But
that?
I did play with Patti Smith, which we put on there.
Oh,
I did, but it has been taken off. But I didn't play with Art Blakey.
right.
This is the nature of Wikipedia, isn't it?
Isn't that weird?
My wife's building me a website at the moment, and loads of people who are working on it say, fuck, I didn't know you worked on that. Christ, I didn't know you did that. What did you do that? I'm going, yep, I did. I didn't play with Art Blakey, though.
Wow.
I would have loved to play with Art Blakey,
Right,
but,
of course.
I played with Art Blakey's tenor player,
Right.
Jean Toussaint. I don't know whether it came from that. I've no idea.
Well, I had a quick scan just to make sure that there wasn't anything important that was missing, and that came through. I was like, I had no idea.
No.
Because it never happened.
I wished I had. Well, maybe I did, and I don't remember
Maybe
it.
you did. Maybe you did.
It was in the drunken years. Yeah, you remember that. No, I don't.
No, it was a 3-year tour.
Yeah.
You did the Tokyo Budokan.
It's gone.
Double live album. Sit down and listen to it. Jeff Beck, though.
Yeah. Jeff Beck.
That is
fantastic experience.
Yes. Tell me about that.
Well, that was through my friend Clive, Demo, who plays drums, was in a band, which I eventually played for, because we lived together and I heard him on the phone. He was trying to put this together. They'd worked on a soundtrack for Peter Richardson, the comic strip dude.
Right, yeah.
Nuns on the Run with Robbie Coltrane, I think.
Yeah.
They did some music in that, and Jeff was doing music with that. And he was looking for a band to do a sort of Cliff Gallup tribute. And so that's what we did, you know.
Right.
It was a band called the Big Town Playboys, and I played acoustic guitar, which you can hardly hear on the record, but I don't care. It was cool. And then we went on to be friends, and I hadn't seen him for a long time before he died. I haven't seen him. I think the last time I saw him was at Ronnie Scott's in the dressing room. I went and said hi, and it was really nice. But I did a few sessions with him. I played on a soundtrack later with Paul Rogers, the free singer, and Jeff, and it was a session of Jeff's, and we played that tune on Broadway. It was all a bit cheesy, you know, but I mean, Christ, I was playing with Jeff, and it was great. Yeah. I really enjoyed it. And when Paul Rogers was singing, I was going, fuck me, that sounds like Paul Rogers. You know what I mean? It's weird, isn't it? Of course he did.
Yeah.
But that's the sign of my youth, you know, All Right Now and some of those free tunes. It was a brilliant experience, but it was on the turn of me not being very interested in guitar anymore. It was when I was making Dummy with Jeff, and I remember playing Numb to Jeff Beck, and him not really getting it. A lot of people around my old world were not really getting what we were trying to do, or what I was trying to, where my friends thought where I was going. Some really got it. Others were like, why are you doing that? That's a bit weird, you know.
That's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, Jeff was not unhip, you know, Jeff Beck. He loved the sound of the snare drum. He thought it sounded like a dustbin. But, you know, he's from a whole different world, but very much an experimental guitar player sonically, you know. Yeah. I sat next to him. He played, I borrowed one of those red airline guitars.
Fiberglass numbers.
Yeah, it sounded really good, cranked.
Reso glass.
Yeah, exactly. And they sounded great. And this was before there's a friend of mine, Kevin Brown, had one, and he lent me it for a while. And Jeff played it, was sitting on a sofa, and I was sitting next to him. And honestly, his hands, it's all in his hands, you know. Incredible player. I loved him anyway, you know. I loved his playing from Yardbirds, and there was times when I didn't really dig what he was doing musically, but Blow by Blow was huge record. Phenomenal. You know, on another level, really on another level. Like, somehow it was a proto Jeff Beck that when he became in the 2000s and more on, he was phenomenal, but it was less interesting somehow because it was kind of more formed and Christ, I'm not in any way criticising him. I'm just talking really about Blow by Blow because he was discovering a new him.
Absolutely.
It seemed like to me, and Christ, it was so powerful for me. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, I get exactly what you mean. I mean, I can still listen to Guitar Shop with a lot of love, but Blow by Blow is the one for me. Yeah,
and it was the sonic. It was his. I used to talk to him about it because he switched. He'd play a phrase and then you talked about it leaving gaps. There was it was talking, it was speaking.
Yeah.
It was lyrical in its timing, its rests, its phrasing, and its tone. He would play something really aggressive, and the next phrase would be played very lightly with the volume turned down. I don't think he dropped in to do that. He could have done, doesn't matter, does it? But I've been with him and it's all there in his hands. The volume control is there right in his fingers, so things are changing constantly with the electronics of the guitar and the dynamics of his playing and the bending of it and the whammy bar. It's all it was phenomenal to be around, you know.
Yeah, I can well imagine. I mean, at that point, you know, the level of control, that's something I hadn't really thought about, but the way that you are choking out various frequencies as they hit the amplifier with the tone and volume control.
Yeah, I know. I don't think I got it from Jeff. I think I might have done, but I really like tone down. We talked about this on with the
Flying V, the point.
The Flying V, because the Gretsch is less. You call it the mud switch.
The mud switch.
It's much less subtle because you've got two options, really, haven't you? And your touch.
Yeah.
But I find on a Jazzmaster, I can really get a lot of sounds out of that.
Well, that's something that you mentioned earlier on. Your move to the Jazzmaster as your main instrument has been a real milestone.
Yeah.
Now it's not a guitar that I've ever really understood. I've heard it being used wonderfully by musicians I really admire. I'm yet to understand it myself, but I remain wide open to its message. What is it about the Jazzmaster that's so important to you?
I think my first experience with it was somebody called Barry something, who I later tracked down, but he didn't respond, so I met his email address, and I can't remember his second name or who he played with. It seems like he moved to America. When I was probably about 22, 23, playing a Strat with a terrible skinny tone. Didn't know what I was doing, you know, couldn't get it. And this dude turned up, used one of my amps, a spare of mine, with a Jazzmaster, and got the most incredible sound out of it. And it wasn't like a muffly jazz sound. It was, oh my God, it was just beautiful. And I never forgot it from then on, and that's years and years and years. And I went through arch tops. I played a Telecaster with heavy strings on for years. And of course, I didn't have very much money, so I couldn't switch all the time. But when I first played a Jazzmaster, my friend Heath was selling one. I was looking for one, and I had a Jaguar, which it did it, but not really. And when I first got this 65, he said, borrow it, try it. And I took it to a gig, and I thought, you're not having this back. I'm buying this. This is incredible. And it was like a Strat, but it didn't have that. I'm not a big Strat fan, although I love people who play Strats. I don't play one myself. I've got one, but I don't play it very much. There's something about it. I love single coil pickups. I think they're dynamic. We've just been playing with humbuckers, and I really have a problem with humbuckers. Some of the things that I love about some of the guitars, what I wanted from some of the guitars, like I've got a 175 at the moment. It's a 60s one. It's got humbuckers on it. The thing I wanted from it is the thing that I don't like about them. You know, they're a bit muddy. They don't have character. They're not dynamic enough for me. I don't know. But single coils, P90s, Jazzmaster pickups, DeArmond, Harmony pickups, fantastic. You know, it's all there, everything you want, for me anyway. And I can turn down the treble, because Jazzmasters are quite chimey, and I use a Vox amp, which is quite chimey. So I'm not looking for that sound, that classic chimey thing. I want it back from that, but I find I shortened the whammy bar on the I've got a 62 and a 65 and quite a new one that somebody made for me, and they will I like having a short whammy so you can get more expression. The volumes are all there. It's a bit like Jeff Beck, really. It's all there, you know. The pickups are really, although they're all quite different, they've got this dynamic range that's really cool. And so for me, I was able to have a guitar that was expressive. That's really what I was looking for. I could bend the notes, and I could bend the whammy bar. I can play behind the bridge.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. And on behind here, there's a lot of good stuff from there. I often do prepared clips on the guitar and stuff, and they're great for that. They rattle there. I slightly modify them. I've modified the bridge. I mean, they're vintage guitars, but they're actually my tools, so I don't really give a damn. They get knocked about, and I dinged one of the frets recently. I had to have it. I must have hit it with a metal bar or something, trying to get making some kind of noise from it, but which they're really good at. for, but it's repaired now. It's all right.
With prepared guitar and that sort of thing, we're veering off into beautiful but potentially quite intimidating area of the instrument, this free form experimental exploratory. It's a word that I prefer rather than experimental. Exploratory area, which I know is very dear to you.
It is, yeah.
Was that something that you loved immediately, or was it an acquired taste?
It was an acquired taste. I'm really on the very beginnings of it because, sonically, I'm not really... I went through all that jazz thing and I found it... I've got nothing to contribute to that world. There's so many fantastic players, not just guitar players. I listened to Love Supreme probably a couple of thousand times in my life, more, and Coltrane and all of the players on there. I can never, ever get to that level of spiritual... playing within jazz, within the confines of jazz. I find it really difficult. We have a voice that is predetermined in a way on a guitar for us. It is changing, and it has changed over the years, but it's not of interest to me. So I moved away from that into other things. I'm now actually recording a free jazz record. I started last week, and I'm just on the first step of quite a big staircase of sonic journey. It was like, oh God, I'm on the right path at last, which was really useful to know. I think I heard Fred Frith play when I was quite young, and I didn't really understand because I knew his band Henry Cow and was kind of interested, although I found it, listening to Coltrane and Hendrix and people, I didn't find a passion in it that I would get from that music, but I found something else.
Yes. Yeah, and, there's some beautiful textures in Frith's work and some really lovely moments, especially in... Oh, God. Don't you hate it when that happens? The thing about the birds.
I don't know.
Let me Google this. This is embarrassing. We've got no internet.
I know. Now we're knackered, aren't we?
Do you remember those times when you had to actually know something in order to speak with authority?
Yeah.
God. Well, look, I'll zoom in from my studio and go, actually...
It was this.
It was this. Michael Watts from the future again. And actually, it was a piece called No Birds from Fred Frith's album Guitar Solos. Right, now we know. Back to it. One of the things that you mentioned earlier on about the earlier Portishead recordings was the limitations.
Yeah.
And you found some sort of comfort in that to some degree because you knew where your boundaries were.
Yeah.
Do you find that the exploratory jazz is a completely different, throwing things wide open side of your character?
It is. I would always put restrictions on, because I've got a studio full of every kind of equipment you would ever probably want, way more than I ever need. I've got a huge collection of synthesizers, guitars, pedals, drum kits, microphones. It's endless. And I'm now renting a room with nothing in it to write music because I can't actually write with all this stuff looking at me.
That's quite conceptual. Literally just a desk, is it? And a pencil.
Some music paper, I will take a laptop. I'm really interested in further exploration on the guitar, Within my... within the vocabulary that I want, what I want to express. I'm not entirely changing everything. I hear Fred Frith play, and that's his thing. And when I watch him play, and we've never played together. We taught together. We did a talk about sonics at a festival, and we're talking about playing together. Him, Derek Bailey.
Yes.
Derek Bailey, incredibly musical, even though you might not think that. Some people might not think that.
To the layman first contact, yes, it may sound a little...
but it's beautifully composed and...
Of course.
And lyrical, as is Fred Frith. You see him play, and he plays flat, and Keith Rose, another one, actually, is amazing. But there's something about Fred's playing that is incredibly musical, even though he's pulling a string through the guitar, When I first saw him play in London in the 70s, a solo performance, I totally didn't get it. I was utterly confused by it. And the whole night, actually, was all sorts of avant-garde, inverted commas, kind of music at one of the theatres in London. I can't even remember. We went down to watch. And I was, it wasn't in hatred. I was just in like, I don't understand. What is this? And now I just feel there's this fantastic momentum and beauty about what he plays. And he can play. I remember seeing him play with Mike Oldfield when they did the live Tubular Bells. It was him playing bass and guitar, just straight, as straight as Mike Oldfield is, fuzz guitar, twin lead with Steve Hillage,
Perfect.
Yeah. So, I'm just interested in the further kind of effects. My effects are really simple. There's quite a few of them on the board because of different sounds, but it is basically the Jimi Hendrix thing. It's a fuzz face, a wah-wah pedal, and an echo.
Right.
But they're slightly different ones and different levels because I don't have an amp that's full knacker, So I have another distortion that will do that and play through a smaller amplifier,
Right.
So it's that, really. And then in things that I can play with that I've stolen from people over the years, like playing with a screwdriver.
I've seen that. Screwdriver, pliers, all sorts of good stuff going on.
Yeah, and a violin bow, EBow. I love EBow.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
What did you feel when you first got an EBow and you listened to the cassette that comes with it?
I didn't have the cassette, but I got it later, and those arpeggios are amazing.
All this going on.
I've used them like hell on records, actually. But the first time I really used an EBow was on Dummy.
Right.
And I just had the multi-tracks transferred, and I've been listening to the original takes. There's actually only 2 takes of Glory Box Solo, and I might have dropped in on one of them, the main one you hear, and the other one was sort of, ooh, that's not it. And then the next one was, oh, that's it. But on Rhodes, I always wanted to do an orchestra or an orchestral arrangement with an EBow. And I borrowed an EBow, and I nearly threw the fucking thing through the window of the control room. I didn't know how to use it, and if you get it too near the pickup, it fucking takes your head off. And I was constantly doing that, and I just gave up. But actually, I listened to the multis recently, and there is a little bit of that going on. It's quite cool, actually. I quite like it. Obviously, we worked on an arrangement for strings, which is what we did in the end. I'm also a massive fan of Sonic Youth, and I don't use a lot of alternate tunings, but I do. I remember seeing them play in Barcelona. I was playing with John Parrish's band, and we were standing on the side of the stage, and I remember we had this close-up view of them. They were absolutely firing. It was at Primavera in Barcelona, probably in 2003 or something like that, and I just remember them having feedback. All of them had feedback going on, and then they just changed position, and the pitch changed of all of it, and they were like, oh, like this, and it was, oh man, it was so exciting,
Wow.
Yeah. Another thing that's really important to me, and I've been involved in quite a lot in the avant-garde world, if you like, is when I was introduced to Glenn Branca's music by John Parrish and Guitar Orchestra, which I've done quite a lot of, and actually it's with great reverence to Glenn. Well, I did work with him on, I got him to come down to all tomorrow's parties and write us a piece for a collection of guitars. There was about 9 of us, I think. John Parrish was there, Jim, our bass player, was playing guitar, Thurston Moore played with us, and Glenn Branca, I remember saying to him, will you conduct? And he said, I don't really do that anymore, man. And I was like, oh, please, I think I'll make a difference, And he did. It was really cool, because he's quite a harsh man, and just to have his conducting us made all the difference, So I'm really, 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 really interested in collective guitar, quartets, octets, 20, 60 guitars, the noise that this can make. And I've written pieces for my extended techniques with screwdriver or pieces of drumsticks or whatever for like 15 guitars to see what would happen. Showed them how I did it, and then everyone's got a different harmony, or they're like 3 might have an A, and this 3 have got an E below that, and then the guitars are all tuned to one note, like 3 octaves of E, You'll have to come and play sometime.
I would love that.
Fuck
really
Dadgad, it's all E. Try playing Stairway to Heaven on that, it's hilarious.
When life on the fretboard was still in the planning stage, I went to see a friend of mine. He has a podcast of his own. It deals with technology, finance and the luxury arena, and it has well over 1 million listeners, and I wanted to get some advice. He said that 85% of podcasts fail before they reach episode 8. Well, here we are. Thank you very much to everyone who's listened so far. Your support means a great deal to me. While I'm here, I'd also encourage you to enjoy 2 recent additions to Fretboard Journal's portfolio of podcasting. Steel, hosted by Matt Perpick, and Guitar for Introverts, hosted by Jamie Stillway. Give them a listen, I think you'll enjoy them. If you'd like to contribute directly to my work on this podcast, there is a tip jar link in the description below. Thank you very much indeed.
For me, every day is a school day, you know. Listening to you talking about Dadgad was is a school day for me, you know, because I don't, and watching you play, I don't do that, you know what I mean? Like I said, I have dipped my toe into it, having to play an Annie Briggs song. You could probably show me how to play it properly, because I don't know how to play it properly.
The joy of something like that, I think, is that everyone approaches it on a personal level, and that's doubtless true of the guitar as well, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so.
We're all on the same team, and what I love about that is, you know, I can count people like you and Jimi Hendrix and
well, you put me in the same sentence as Jimi Hendrix.
Yes, quite happily, because, you know, my cassette collection in 1996 was pretty much you and Hendrix and, and a couple of others, a bit of Roy Buchanan,
right? Yeah, fantastic.
A lot of Santana going on at that point. But the point I was stumbling over was that, you know, we all have something to say on the instrument that's entirely personal.
Yeah, and they're the same 6 strings. Well, mainly. Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Unless you've hung paper clips all over the thing.
Well, yes, exactly. And
bulldog clips, and you've run extra currents through it.
Yeah. Or you've clipped on what I'm into also is clipping on an acoustic mic on the back of the guitar, you know, like a pickup, like a shit,
like a piezo transducer.
Yeah, you know, crappy. I haven't got my guitar here. I was looking at that casing, and there's my guitar. We'll have one in there. They're just shitty things that they're like £8. I can't remember who makes them, and they clip on the back. But any kind of contact, you know, crap pickup that you don't want on your acoustic guitar, stick that on the back of an electric or under the, you know, and stuff that into another amp. You know, you've got another thing going on.
You have indeed. Yeah, Ollie Teufel, the luthier, has a system where one of his guitars, it's got a button where you can get immediate, I think it's 60 cycle hum when you press it.
Oh, right, yeah.
And then immediate microphonic feedback.
Oh, right, yeah.
Using something similar to that. I think it's like a tiny something buried in the thing. I mean, there's so many noises that the electric guitar is capable of making. That don't necessarily go through the pickups first time round.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that we were talking about, and one of the reasons why I was so happy you accepted this invitation to join me today was we were looking at a 1958 Carina Flying V. Obviously, this is one of the most desirable electric guitars on the planet as far as collectors of the instrument go. And yet, I sat and I thought to myself, well, what the hell am I going to play on an instrument that's so fundamentally alien to me? And then I thought, well, if there's anybody who can help me through that...
Who was also alien.
But at the same time, who will appreciate that challenge and who will go absolutely open-heartedly, here we go, whatever it is, it's Adrian. So, I was absolutely thrilled to give that a go. But what I noticed as we were exploring the instrument together was just how rewarding it can be to a more traditional approach. You know, you were playing some beautiful jazz on it, and as you know, we discussed when we were playing earlier, 1958, no one really knew what the acoustic guitar was.
The electric.
1958, no, I'll try this again, third take. I'll drop in. Hang on.
Take 7.
That's like George
Take
Martin.
8.
Take 28 and take 47. Let's stick those together.
Amazing.
Oh, fucking hell. Right. So,
But no, you're right.
1958, no one really knew what the electric guitar was supposed to do. There was nothing presupposed. There was no repertoire. There was no semantic weight to the outline of the thing or the sounds that it was making. It's all been explored and created and invented by one musician in their bedroom, finding their friends.
Yeah.
And making that sound. And that's just such a glorious thing, even when it is, impossible to hold when you're sitting down, and it's very pointy.
Yeah, it's quite weird, isn't it? Well, it was that new age, the space age kind of thing with the Stratocaster. We were saying, guitars that looked odd and strange and looking not like a guitar, which it doesn't, does it? Gibson, who were kind of premium luthiers, even a Les Paul's got the shape of a guitar, hasn't it? Unlike a Strat or but the extraneous noise. As soon as we plugged that thing into the champ,
Fender champ we've got here.
Yeah, tweed champ. There was an enormous amount of hiss, which I absolutely love. This is like, that's alive, Yeah, I remember Lenny Kravitz. I'm not a big fan of Lenny Kravitz, but I remember
he's a flying V man.
He is a flying man. My God, we forgot about him. And probably for that reason, I'm not a big fan of him. But there's one record he made, and he's a great producer, I think. And Jeff and I were always really fascinated, which is by this particular thing. There was like a lot of hiss on the left-hand side of the stereo, and when you first heard it, you go, "Why is that hiss there?" And then a wah guitar came in, and obviously it was just waiting to come in where he needed to come in, and it was hissing because it was switched on,
right.
And he thought, "Oh, that's cool. I'll just leave that." And I love that because it's a glue that's in the track.
I've lovely way of thinking about it.
Well, yeah, I've often put more hiss on a record or a recording. Yeah, that's probably because my top end is going and I can't quite hear it. The engineer I'm working with, Tim, is going, "Fuck's he want? What's he doing?" Because I really like it. I like the sound of guitars and the noise that they make. Like you picked up on the pickup I didn't hear it, but when I was playing, the strings were hitting the bobbins, and you were hitting the body of the guitar. I love all that stuff. I think that is part of it. Now, I don't want cleaned up guitars. That's my choice. I remember seeing George Van Epps,
7-string chap.
When he has a mute on the end of his guitar,
right,
to stop it all ringing.
Yes.
Because in jazz, your open chords are the enemy.
Exactly.
I love them now. There's nothing quite like an out of tune E chord, is there? Like the Stooges.
Out of tune but loud.
Yeah, phenomenal. But I wouldn't want to mute all that natural reverb. I was just playing a guitar earlier that I really liked, but it doesn't have that natural reverb, which my Martin has got, and a couple of other archtops have got. My L5. Which I absolutely love. I do love acoustic guitars as well. I'm really, really interested in acoustic guitars. I love the sound of them. I love recording them. I have some fantastic acoustic guitars. I have had and have some really classic, like my Martin, 1948 Martin, 1936 L5.
Lovely.
Yeah, they're all lovely guitars, but I think the most I've used a guitar was the one I used on the last album with Portishead on a track called The Rip, which was I got out of a junk shop for £4, and I took it round to Johnny Kincaid, who was fucking really pissed off with me, going, "Can you make this play okay? Because I reckon it had 2 strings on it, and I really liked the sound of it." And
oh, poor Johnny.
Poor Johnny. I know it's absolutely terrible, but we do laugh about it. But that guitar, I played it on so many things.
Right.
And it's a Czechoslovakian kid's student guitar.
Wow.
And it's just got this crusty sound. It sounds like, if you want to sound like, you were talking about Lomax earlier, some of the old blues players, and their guitars were rank and the strings were really old. I never changed the strings on my guitars. I just changed them on my, I just changed it on my 62 Jazzmaster. They must have been on there for 5 years, I think. But I busted with the string.
You're not using flat wounds, using round wounds?
I do use the flat wounds on my Telecaster and on...
Because they last for decades.
They do, and they sound better the older they get.
Yeah. Generationally, there's an improvement.
Yeah. They're not very nice when you first put them on, very first.
So, from what you're telling me, it sounds like you look for the sound at source. You're not into creating something and then futzing with it until it moulds into something else. You want to hear it immediately.
Yeah, I do, actually, and it will be... The guitar is really important, and the touch of the guitar, the tone controls are really important. I have a friend he said, how do you get this sound? And I said, well, I never have the guitar full, ever. Really? It's always backed off, so it takes the top end off a little bit with the volume. Yeah. And he said, I never do that. I've never done that. It's always on full. Yeah. And it's a revelation to him. Well, there were some players, 2 people actually.
Yeah, you turn it up full and snap the knobs off, and there you go. You're done.
Yeah, well, I get that. Yeah, totally. But so tonally, sonic world, it's happening here. My pedals are really important. I do love the sound of fuzz when the guitar is turned down.
Yeah, when you've throttled it, and it's
the dynamics are there, especially a fuzz face, which I know that's what they do. That's a thing they do. And I like to have a decent amp, but the more I go into, I like a Vox amp. I don't know what it is about them. I've never liked Marshalls, although lots of people I know. My favourite players use Marshalls. Jeff Beck used to use Marshalls. I never got it. Hendrix, obviously. But I like Fender amps. I really like. I like the old Tweeds because they're more. There's something about them. Fender Twins I played for like 20 years, and I always struggled. And I didn't realise that's what it was. I thought, oh, that's a cool amp. But I went back when I was a kid. I had a Vox AC30, and I couldn't wait to get a Fender. But now I'm back to Vox because it's got this. They've got this dynamic about them.
Do. Is it the 30 or the 15 you use?
I've got a 30. I've got 3 30s and an original AC10 and a brand new AC10. Lovely. And I use a brand new AC10, even on just played at Glastonbury and tiny little amp. Sounded great. I love it.
There's one final question, which is the premise of the entire show. Adrian Utley, you live a life on the fretboard. What has that meant to you over the years?
God, that's a big question. What's it meant to me? Well, it's been hopefully it will continue to be a journey of much music made in professional and non-professional situations, sitting around with mates playing the guitar or playing to 40,000 people, whatever it is, in the recording studio, learning the craft of recording an acoustic without sneezing, or without breathing
through your ears.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how it's done. Yeah.
It's a big deal, isn't it? All that stuff, all those journey, all that kind of every day is a school day with it. Also, the kind of tranquil, meditative aspect of it in my life, whether I'm playing it or just looking at it, and the friends I've made on the way, and the moments like this, talking about guitars with a fellow traveller, if you like, sitting with all these guitars. And
yes,
I said to my wife the other day, I love guitars. I absolutely love them.
I completely get that. Adrian, thank you so much for your time.
That's all right. It's an absolute pleasure.
And thank you to you for listening. Life on the Fretboard is a Michael Watts production for Fretboard Journal. This episode was brought to you by the kind sponsorship of Elixir Strings. I use phosphor bronze 12 to 53s on all my acoustic guitars. Microtech FL microphones, I used a pair of their M300 small diaphragm models to record this interview, and you're hearing my voice on the M930 model. And of course, you, the listener, please do use the tip jar link to support the podcast. The theme music is my original piece. I've called it Life on the Fretboard for convenience, and I play electric guitar, bass and ukulele. Dan Weston is on drums. The Life on the Fretboard logo and artwork was designed by Michael Johnson. In the next episode, I'll be joined by the sublime Canadian jazz talent Jocelyn Gould to learn more about her life on the fretboard. Until then, stay tuned. I know you will.